let's start with our sales champion here about speaking the language of sales. And, you know, thinking about when you walk into a room, whether it's with someone who's a director of learning or a CTO, what works?
Yeah, so when I look at the business that I support, so I support the West Coast and the Southwest, which equates to about 400 existing customers. And so when I cut that and think, okay, where have we been successful? Where have we been unsuccessful? The ones that have been really successful when trying to either secure new funding or renew like an incumbent program are those who tie their program to business objectives and strategy and business outcomes. Those who struggle generally don't have that level of, I'll say, maturity in sales to present that to leadership. And that's when leaders start poking holes and why do we need this? Is this relevant? How does it relate to what we're trying to do? So from a Skillsoft perspective, how we support that, we have a whole team behind the scenes that can help build and support business cases. So we look at what is your investor report say? What has your CIO or CEO been saying in the media? And we take all these different sources, dilute it down, and then vet with our customers, you know, is this the same messaging you're receiving internally? If so, that's great. If not, that's another conversation of, well, then where's the disconnect, right? If the top is saying one thing, but we're in the middle and it's not getting down to the employee, how can we help bring that message up to leadership in a way that's a solution, not calling out and bringing light to a problem? So I think staying solution focused is a really big part of being successful and telling stories, right? So again, you have lots of customers. So whether it's Skillsoft or another provider, you should be able to go to them and ask, hey, what does good look like, right? What are other people in this space, in this industry doing? Why is it working? Why isn't it working? And then use that to help inform the decisions that you're making internally.
Thank you. From my others here, who wants to add on to that?
I think the element that resonates the most is talking about the business value and the value that having the business acumen to not only go through the speeds and feeds of what you're selling, but be able to translate whether, you know, based on the role that you're talking to, if it's a technical person or if it's a business person or a marketing person, you know, being able to speak their language and be able to talk about the value and how it means to them versus what it means to you know, Skillsoft.
Right, and I think you bring up an interesting point because too often salespeople and program leaders who are trying to secure funding focus too much on the features and functions of a product, not in the what is the end result, what are we trying to solve for? And I think by focusing on, again, solution rather than what are the steps on a back end that we experience, and that's important, but that shouldn't be the leading decision of why you're buying or why you're evaluating.
Right? What are those? Oh, go ahead.
That's what I was just gonna say. I always think the way to convince people is either one or the other, or usually both, stories and data. You know, I think stories really resonates with the emotional part, and just telling the story about, you know, how your product or whatnot has really helped somebody, I think can bring it to life. And then obviously the data too that shows the real return, you know, that clinches the deal. So.
Absolutely. I think the other element of that is trust. There has to be a certain level of transparency and trust with the vendor to provide enough information to help them help you build a compelling story. So we get into some instances where everything is very lock and key, where we don't want to tell you what our guiding principles are. We don't want to share the actual reason why this program is being thought of. And that's where it becomes really challenging because we can't provide the direction to help you, again, sell that story. So I think having that open communication, being open to sharing information only helps your program hopefully get the funding that you're looking to secure.
So we talked a little bit at the beginning how engineering is sometimes different. Rob, I'll ask you, facts, figures, features, buttons, that's often what a lot of engineers are talking about. But what is it like to sell them on the value of something when it's not necessarily about the features?
I think it's interesting. In my experience, the most successful engineering training programs have partnered pretty closely with the engineering team. and then almost use the engineering team to sell it and get the funding and like explain the problem and explain the business case. And I think if you spend time with the partner that you're working with and you say, okay, I've got my vision of what the problem you need to solve is.
Right.
What's your vision of the problem you need to solve? And how do we make those two things the same?
Right.
So that when we're presenting this to our maybe separate leaderships, they both understand the value of it and it's a consistent story.
Absolutely. Oh, it's about having that proof point, right? I think you bring up an interesting topic because in traditional e-learning, the employer is the one who makes the selection, chooses the vendor, and that's what you market and push out and make available as a benefit to your employees. But in today's world where there's organizations going straight to a consumer, so going to those high school kids, going to college students, and they're coming out of school with an opinion about what type of vendor they want to partner with, what do you do, right? Because you have an opinion, but then you as an L&D organization might have a different ideology of what good learning content looks like. So like trying to balance those two. And oftentimes it results in a pilot, right? Where you have a small group of people, test it out, create a survey at the end, and really get those proof points of, is it going to give the outcomes that we were hoping to achieve in the first place?
Do you do a lot of pilots?
Many pilots.
Yeah.
Yes, quite a few. Most of our new business deals that we start usually happen on a 6-month pilot first, and then transition into larger contracts.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would just add something to what Justine said, where she, they're talking to kind of an enterprise buyer, so she's wanting to understand overall objectives, overall goals of that company, maybe what they've said in press releases, what they gave in their 10Ks and their analyst reports, that sort of thing. But I think also as a talent development professionals on the ground, it's really helpful to just get to know people. Many of you are doing that, and it's hard to carve out time in your day. It's you're all very busy, but to just really sit down with an engineering leader or individual engineers or senior engineers or principal architects or your controller or just different people across the organization to really understand what just get to know them, right? And just because sometimes they'll say something that may resonate with you, that that might I've heard that from other people. So just an example, when I started a program at Expedia to look at churn. So Expedia in this 15-year history had never looked at churn before, like how many bookings get canceled. So they asked me, so it was me and one analyst, to look at churn for all Expedia brands globally. And nobody looked at it. Nobody knew how to measure it. Nobody really knew if they should care about it. And so my job was partly to go around the world, and just meet with people and just tell them, here's the data that we have, here's what we're seeing. And just little 30-minute meetings all over. And for you, that might be, I'm going to go do lunch with 2 different people a week, or a coffee, or whatever that may be, just to kind of have that dialogue and just better understand what people are asking for, because what higher level leadership may want may not be the same as the people you're going to be training want. And so what I have found in that effort was, sometimes I'll just tell people and they're like, oh, that explains this thing that we were seeing, in this area of our business. And then I become just kind of naturally very smart in this very narrow space, because I'm getting input from different functional areas, different brands, all over the world. And I can then present to our CEO, here's the feedback that I'm seeing. But the only way for you to really get that is to just meet and understand with as many people as you can. And that's just some time you're going to have to carve out. You say, I'm going to meet with 3 new people a week, or whatever metric works for you. And I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I had a hard time thinking about your question about features and buttons and switches, and I've been racking my brains as to why. It's true, why am I not focused on features when it comes to the learning platform and the technology that's been rolled out? And I think when I reflect on that question, from an engineering leadership perspective and from an engineering training perspective, the cost to me of developing content, really high quality, in-depth content, dwarfs any of the technology spend. And like at that point, it becomes far less about switches and features and quizzes and multimedia and interaction, and more about where am I going to find all of this resourcing to develop a high quality training course with videos and code samples and things that work, and GitHub repositories with examples. That almost dwarfs or eclipses the conversation around what features are available within that course and how we're going to score it and mark it and grade it. And it becomes a big discussion around how we're going to invest in developing content.
I think right now that's like a huge shift with the LMS versus an LXP. And I'm sure it's a fairly divided topic in here, people in each camp. But what I'm seeing is those organizations that are holding on to their LMS, and I'm not saying that it's bad, but those that are holding on to the LMS and are fearful of what the LXP learning experience platform means to them, they're holding on to, well, the LXP doesn't give me this function, and this function. And it's like, is it just because it's what you're comfortable with and what you know? Or is this something that is a requirement for you to run a successful learning experience for your employees? So I think sometimes like getting pushback from your partner or your vendor, really sit back and like think about why they're asking the question and have that open dialogue about, fear of change, because I think it's very real.